At the end of episode 7, we see Dexter and Batista confront each other in a tense car ride. Dexter basically confesses, saying, "If I really am who you think I am, this doesn't end well for you." But by the end of their encounter, unknown to Dexter, Batista plants a tracking device in his car. All of this raises the crucial question: what will happen to Angel Batista? In this video, we're going to explore 3 theories about Angel Batista's fate for the rest of Dexter Resurrection, involving Leon Prder's serial killer network, the Morgan's protective instincts, and the possibility of exposing Dexter to the entire world. Theory 1. Angel Batista is killed by a Morgan. If Batista's tracking device works as well as he hopes, it could end up sealing his own fate by leading him straight into Dexter's dark world. The GPS trail would likely take Angel to places no innocent forensic analyst should ever go. Maybe the abandoned furnace where Dexter had burned his recent victims, or catching him stalking his next target from Leon Prder's serial killer group. This mirrors what happened to James Dokes and Maria LaGuerta, 2 other Miami Metro investigators who left their suspicions take them too far into dangerous territory. Dokes was the first to sense something was seriously wrong with Dexter, following his gut even though he had no solid proof. His relentless pursuit led him to that remote cabin where he finally confronted Dexter with undeniable evidence. But this moment of victory became his death sentence when Lila West's interference resulted in the explosion that killed him, letting Dexter frame him as the Bay Harbor Butcher after death. Dokes died knowing the truth, but unable to tell anyone, his reputation forever ruined by the crimes he never committed. Years later, Maria LaGuerta picked up where Dokes left off, driven by guilt over dismissing her colleague's suspicions and determined to clear his name. Finding a bloodslide at Travis Marshall's crime scene reignited the Bay Harbor Butcher investigation, leading her down the same dangerous path. LaGuerta's careful investigation eventually cornered Dexter, but her moment of triumph quickly became a nightmare when she found herself framed and discredited. Like Dokes before her, she paid the ultimate price for getting too close to the truth, dying in that shipping container knowing that Dexter Morgan was indeed the monster she'd been hunting. Now Batista seems to be following a similar fate. If the tracker leads him to witness Dexter disposing of body parts from his recent kills, or documents him visiting locations connected to murdered serial killers like Ronald Red Schmidt, Lowell, or the Gemini twins, this would give him the concrete evidence that Dokes and LaGuerta never had. Unlike his predecessors, who relied on gut feelings and circumstantial evidence, Batista could potentially gather video footage, GPS coordinates, and timestamp proof of Dexter's activities. But this advantage could also be his downfall. If Batista witnesses Dexter's methodical dismemberment process, or catches him in his kill clothes preparing another victim, there would be no going back. Unlike previous investigators who died based on suspicion alone, Batista would have undeniable proof of Dexter's activities, evidence so damning that Dexter couldn't talk his way out of it or frame someone else. This would force Dexter into an impossible situation where his only choices are complete exposure or permanently eliminating the threat. The psychological pressure on Dexter would be enormous. Throughout the series, he's shown particular sensitivity about being discovered by those closest to him, especially former colleagues who trusted him. Killing Batista wouldn't just be another strategic elimination. It would mean destroying one of his last genuine relationships from his Miami life. The man who attended his wedding to Rita, who worked alongside him for decades, who genuinely cared about his well-being, would become another casualty of Dexter's need for self-preservation. The situation could get even more complicated if Harrison discovers that Batista is closing in on their secret through surveillance. Having already crossed the line by killing Ryan Foster, Harrison has shown both the ability and willingness to commit murder when he sees a threat to innocent people. If he views Batista's investigation as a deadly danger to his father, the only family he has left, Harrison might rationalize elimination as protecting his family. The young Morgan has shown increasing comfort with violence, and his protective instincts towards Dexter could override any moral reservations about killing a police officer. This scenario would be a tragic end to the cycle that began with Dokes. Each investigator who got close to the truth died not because they were wrong, but because they were right. The very accuracy of their suspicions made them too dangerous to live. If Batista follows this pattern, his death would be even more significant because unlike Dokes or LaGuerta, he wouldn't be operating on hunches or guilt. He'd be following digital evidence directly to Dexter's crimes. Whether it's Dexter making a calculated decision to preserve his cover, or Harrison acting impulsively to defend his family, the tracker that Batista believes will lead to justice could instead guide him directly to his own grave. The bitter irony would be that the same technology meant to finally expose the Bay Harbor Butcher would instead create another victim. Batista would join Dokes and LaGuerta as Miami Metro investigators who died not because they failed to solve the case, but because they solved it too well. The tracker represents both Batista's greatest investigative tool and potentially his death warrant, a technological thread that could either unravel Dexter's carefully constructed facade or lead Angel Batista to become the third Miami Metro detective to pay the ultimate price for getting too close to the truth about Dexter Morgan. So this is one theory of what could happen to Angel Batista, but I feel like in a way it's too predictable, which brings me to the second theory. But before we get on to that, I would like to remind you to subscribe if you're enjoying the video. Theory 2. Angel Batista exposes Dexter's secret. Despite all the signs pointing to Angel Batista meeting the said damnly fate as James Dokes and Maria LaGuerta, there is a strong chance that he could become the first Miami Metro investigator to not only survive hunting Dexter, but actually expose him to the world. Unlike Dokes and LaGuerta, who worked alone and died with their secrets, Batista surviving would break the tired pattern of everyone else who discovered Dexter's secret, where Dexter's plot armor just comes in and saves the day, giving us no real satisfaction. The season finale, and Justice for All, could deliver exactly what the title promises when Batista goes public with proof that Dexter is the Bay Harbor Butcher. But here's the twist. This wouldn't necessarily mean that Dexter gets arrested right away. Instead, it could create an interesting situation where everyone knows who Dexter really is, but he can't be prosecuted because of legal loopholes or lack of physical evidence. Batista might have convincing proof, like photos, witness statements, or documented patterns, but it's not the hard evidence needed to actually convict Dexter in court. This could be because the evidence is circumstantial or illegally obtained. This would let the show explore completely new territory, Dexter operating in the open while everyone knows what he is, but he's still legally untouchable. This would also finally clear Dokes' names while creating a partially exposed dynamic where Dexter loses his anonymity but keeps his freedom. This revelation would completely change how the show works in future seasons, opening up storytelling possibilities we'd never seen before. Instead of the usual game where Dexter hides from clueless cops, upcoming seasons could show how he deals with life as a known serial killer. Quinn's return in the trailers might not be him getting the call that Batista is dead like everyone thinks. It could be Batista finally bringing Quinn and Masuka into his plan like he promised, when he said he'd tell them when the time is right. Having multiple detectives working together would prevent the isolation that got previous investigators killed, creating a team of enemies instead of lone wolves who are easy targets. The mental impact on Dexter would be fascinating to watch. Throughout the series, he's shown mixed feelings about fame and recognition. He likes getting credit for his kills when he controls it, but hates exposure when he doesn't. His obvious anger at seeing Dokes get credit in the Killing Century book shows parts of him resents not getting recognition for his work. Being publicly exposed could be both a punishment and a twisted reward for his ego, forcing him to live in a world where everyone knows about his dark side, but he's still legally protected. Harrison's story would change dramatically too. Growing up as the son of a publicly known serial killer would create completely different challenges than secretly struggling with inherited darkness. The father-son relationship would shift as Harrison grapples with either defending or distracting himself from Dexter's reputation once their family history becomes public knowledge. From a storytelling standpoint, this approach would let the series keep Dexter as the main character, while finally delivering real consequences for decades of lies and murder. Instead of another temporary reset, where a threatening investigator conveniently dies, Batista surviving and exposing the truth would permanently change the show's foundation. Future seasons could explore themes of fame, vigilante justice, and public opinion that were impossible when Dexter worked in the shadows. We could see scenarios where Dexter's reputation precedes him, victims' families seek him out, other killers either fear or worship him, and law enforcement navigates the politics of pursuing someone the public might view as a controversial hero. This theory suggests that Batista's investigation represents transformation rather than conclusion, evolving the series from a story about a hidden monster to one about a public figure whose existence forces society to question what justice really means and where the line falls between hero and villain. But before we get on to the last theory of the video, I just want to remind you to subscribe if you are enjoying the content. And here we go, theory number 3, Batista discovers the Prder network. If Batista's tracking device leads him deeper into Dexter's activities, it could accidentally guide him to an even more dangerous discovery: Leon Prder's underground serial killer network. The GPS trail might start by following Dexter's usual patterns, but as Batista watches the data, he could notice something much more alarming. Regular meetings at fancy locations, helicopter flights to remote estates, and connections to multiple missing people that go way beyond what Dexter normally does. This discovery would change Batista's investigation from going after one suspected serial killer into accidentally stumbling upon what could be the biggest organized serial killer operation in criminal history. Unlike Dokes and LaGuerta, who were chasing Dexter alone, Batista would find himself accidentally uncovering a network that includes wealthy supporters, professional killers, and a sophisticated setup designed to help and profit from murder. Things would get much more complicated when Batista realizes the missing people connected to Prder's organization include Lowell, the tattoo collector, Mia LaPierre, Lady Vengeance, and the Gemini killer twin that Dexter eliminated. Following the tracker data, Batista might discover that these weren't random disappearances, but systematic eliminations, potentially making him wonder whether Dexter is part of the network or working to destroy it from the inside. This would force Batista to face an uncomfortable truth. If Dexter is killing monsters of Prder's group, he might actually be doing a service by eliminating killers that law enforcement couldn't catch. The moral complexity would be overwhelming. Batista would have to consider that his pursuit for justice might actually be protecting a network of killers who are far worse than the man he's been hunting. But what if Charlie discovers that Batista is tracking Dexter? As Prder's enforcer and security chief, she would likely spot Batista's surveillance through counter-surveillance measures, potentially finding the tracking device or noticing patterns in Dexter's behavior that suggest he's being watched. If Charlie realizes there's outside interference, her response would be swift and brutal. Unlike Dexter, who has personal connections to Batista that might make him hesitate, Charlie operates purely on professional instinct and loyalty to Prder. Her military background and ruthless efficiency would make her far more likely to eliminate threats immediately rather than engage in psychological games that Dexter prefers. If Charlie determines that Batista poses a risk to the operation, she might move to eliminate him in a way that appears completely unrelated to his investigation, perhaps staging an accident, a random mugging, or even framing him for corruption to discredit his findings before silencing him permanently. The situation becomes even more dangerous if Prder himself becomes aware of Batista's investigation. Given Prder's wealth, connections, and resources, he might have the capability to not only eliminate Batista, but to manipulate the entire investigation from behind the scenes. If Prder discovers that a Miami Metro detective is tracking one of his assets, he might view this as a direct threat to his entire operation. The endgame scenarios become incredibly complex when considering how the NYPD would respond to all these interconnected discoveries. Detective Wallace and Detective Olivia are already investigating multiple cases that connect to this web: Ryan Foster's murder, Lady Vengeance's activities, and various missing person reports. If Batista shares his tracking data and suspicions with them before Charlie or Prder can stop him, it could trigger a massive joint investigation involving Miami Metro, NYPD, and potentially federal agencies. But what if Charlie intercepts this information first? She might be able to manipulate the evidence, frame Batista as a rogue officer, or even stage his death to look like suicide due to guilt over false accusations. The most intriguing possibility lies in how this discovery might force unexpected alliances. If Batista uncovers that Dexter has been systematically eliminating members of Prder's network, he might find himself choosing between arresting the Bay Harbor Butcher and protecting someone dismantling a far more dangerous criminal enterprise. But for Batista, this moral complexity likely wouldn't matter. His mind is already made up because this isn't just about justice, it's personal. He wants to avenge LaGuerta, Dokes, and Deb, and no amount of greater good justification will change his determination to bring Dexter down. If Charlie and Prder discover Batista's investigation, they might try to manipulate him into believing Dexter is their enemy rather than their asset, potentially turning the detective into an unwitting ally. Alternatively, they could frame Dexter for crimes committed by their network, using Batista's investigation to eliminate both threats simultaneously. The investigation could reach a breaking point where multiple forces collide: Batista with tracking evidence, Wallace and Olivia investigating connected murders, federal agencies responding to Prder's network, and Charlie working to eliminate all threats. The question becomes whether Charlie and Prder can contain the situation before it spirals out of control, or whether their attempts to silence Batista will actually accelerate the exposure of their entire network. The tracker that Batista had planted as a simple surveillance tool could ultimately become the thread that either unravels everything or gets him killed before he can pull it. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.